So we're good to go, Vraj. Vihari Prabhu. Hare Krishna. The
Hare
floor is yours.
And good morning from the mountains of Washington State, near Seattle. That's where I am. That's why I'm on a business trip. My apologies for not bringing Tilak with me or Kurta. So, Hare Krishna. I did put on water Tilak, but you might not see that.
Are you wearing dhoti at least?
Yogi pants, yeah.
Okay, good.
All right. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay. So you want me to share my screen to show I can do that? Show the verse?
Yeah, that would be nice. If not, no problem. We'll follow. We'll close our eyes and follow.
I have it here. I just have so many things open. Just give me a second to find it.
Okay.
There we go. Database. No, that's not it.
It's 10:21:17.
Yeah, I know. I have it open. I just have so many things open on my. Just give me a second.
Andrea says, clothes and tilak don't make a devotee. Your faith and service to Krishna does.
I don't know why. Anyway, if you could put it on the screen for some reason.
Give me a second. I'll do that.
I don't know why it is that it's not showing up.
And yoga pants don't make a yogi.
That's definitely. I don't think yogis ever wear yogi pants.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. There you go. See it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so we'll go over the word for word. So Purna means fully satisfied, or it means complete, like Om Purna Purnamidam, right? In the invocation of the Ishopanishad. And Pulinda means the wives of the Shabra tribe, which Prabhupada here will call them Aborigine. Urukaya is a name for Krishna, and Pada Amja means from the lotus feet, right? Pada means feet, and Abja means like born from. Raga of reddish color, and Sri Kun Kumena by the transcendental Kuma powder. So not just regular powder, but this is transcendental power that's touched the lotus feet of Krishna. Daita of his girlfriends. Stana means the breasts. Manditena means which have decorated. Tat of that. Darshana by the sight. We know that word, right? Smara of Cupid. Ruja feeling the torment. Trina means like Trinada P, Sunichena, upon the blades of grass. Rusitena means attached. Limpantya means smearing. Ananna upon their faces. Kuchesu and breasts. Jahu means they gave up. Tat that, and adhim mental pain. So the translation is the Aborigine women of the Vrindavan area. So this is the previous in the word for word Sabara from that lineage. Became disturbed by lust when they become disturbed by lust when they see the grass marked with reddish kumkum powder. Endowed with the color of Krishna's lotus feet, this powder originally decorated the breasts of his beloveds. And when the Aborigine women smear it on their faces and breasts, they feel fully satisfied and give up all their anxiety. Purport. Srila Prabhupada explains this verse as follows, quote, the Aborigine girls became fully satisfied when they smeared their faces and breasts with the dust of Vrindavan, which was reddish from the touch of Krishna's lotus feet. The Aborigine girls had very full breasts, and they were also very lusty. But when their lovers touched their breasts, the girls were not very much satisfied. When they came out into the midst of the forest, they saw that while Krishna was walking, some of the leaves and creepers of Vrindavan had turned reddish from the kumkum powder which fell from his lotus feet. His lotus feet are held by the gopis on their breasts, which are smeared with kumkum powder. But when Krishna travels in the Vrindavan forest with Balaram and his boyfriends, the reddish powder falls on the ground. So the lusty Aborigine girls, while looking toward Krishna playing his flute, saw the reddish kumkum on the ground and immediately took it and smeared it over their faces and breasts. In this way, they became fully satisfied, although they were not satisfied when their lovers touched their breasts. All material lusty desires can be immediately satisfied if one comes in contact with Krishna consciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So I have to thank Ananda Vihari Prabhu for giving me a verse that talks all about breasts. Hare Krishna.
This is why we gave it to you. You were balanced and realized.
Yeah, right. Sometimes people may read the Shastra and Srila Prabhupada's commentaries on the Shastra and say, why are you so anti-sex? Right? Isn't it anti-love? Isn't sex, when done appropriately, bring people together and closer to one another, and even produce a beautiful child? Trying to remember, my mind thinks like a 1960s and 70s jukebox. Danny's song, if anyone knows that, but I think the child, he will be like she and me, conceived in love. Anyway, I don't need the Longins and Messina, I think. So there's definitely, so why are we so, seemingly, anti-sex, or as some people joke, if you just added one comma to the Bhagavad Gita, it would change the whole Krishna consciousness movement. If you just said, I am that sex life, comma, which is not against religious principles, that could change everyone's view. But the reality is that we can talk about it on so many levels, but I like to talk about it often on the existential level, right? That we are souls, and we are by nature nitya siddha Krishna prema sadhyuka binoy shavanadi sudichite koreyedo. We are by nature Krishna's eternal lover, Krishna's eternal servant, and we are in the material world because we're looking out for number one. We're looking out for ourselves. We're looking out for our own enjoyment, and in our false ego makes us the star of our movie. All of us are in a movie in life, one way to look at it, and we're the star. And maybe there's a co-star or two, but everyone else in the world is an extra. Like in Ben-Hur, there were like 10,000 extras, right? And what we are trying to cultivate by taking up the path of bhakti is to put Krishna in the center. Krishna is the star of our show. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says that the mind is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Now, how is that? Because the mind is, well, now getting a little technical, not too technical, but the mind accepts and rejects, right? That's the sankalpa vikalpa. The mind accepts and then rejects it. But what is the basis of the mind accepting and rejecting? That's the key question. And the basis is the mind being affected, or you could even say protecting our false ego, our false identity of who we think we are, or is the mind in line with our real identity, Nitya Krishna Das, Krishna's eternal servant? So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur is saying that the mind is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world, because the mind in this world and in this life that we have is directly or indirectly pretty much focused on us. You know, Prabhupada would say sometimes it's not just us, sometimes it's our family, sometimes it's our sports team, sometimes it's our nation, etc. He would say different isms. But it's so then the mind is accepting and rejecting just based on who we think we are, and therefore accepting things that reinforce that identity and rejecting things that don't reinforce that identity. And if the main identity is I am the enjoyer, I am the controller, then it's accepting and rejecting in quite a material way. So why is it a perverted reflection of the spiritual world? Because in the spiritual world, Krishna is the center, not us. So that's why perverted reflection. So in the spiritual world, our mind is just absorbed in what gives Krishna pleasure and having that loving relationship with Krishna. And lo and behold, material activities, and we know, kind of the king of those being sex, it reinforces the false conception of who we are. Now, of course, that could be Krishnaized by conceiving children in spiritual consciousness, and using sex to for its original purpose to beget children, and specifically to beget children of spiritual consciousness. And therefore there's the Garbhodang Samskara and the whole idea of the husband and wife praying to the Lord and performing sometimes even some rituals, but the main idea is chanting Krishna's name and praying to the Lord that a devotional soul will be conceived in this relationship. And that, by the way, can be an extremely spiritual. That kind of sex life can be an extremely spiritual experience, being absorbed in that mentality when having sex. So there are many ways to deal with our concerns over lust, right? I thought I'd read this one. Oh, did I? Yeah, I did read it. I'm getting old. I'm just jet lag also from traveling too much. But this is from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I was just hearing this yesterday. And Prabhupada writes that one should not trust his mind, which is so fickle that it can give way to enemies at any moment. The mind is always accompanied by 6 enemies, namely kama, lust, krodh, anger, mada, moha, matsarya, and maya. That is lust, anger, intoxication, illusion, envy, and fear. So these, again, if we look at what we just talked about, these are all coming due to our mind being focused on our false conception of who we are. Although the mind may be merged, now listen to this is good instructions for us. Although the mind may be merged in spiritual consciousness, one should always be very careful in dealing with it, just as one is careful in dealing with a snake. Right? I remember one time I was in Vrindavan, and it was at the MVT, and it was out in Balaram Purnima, and there was this huge cobra, actually in some ways gorgeous, jet black cobra, just and very big, very big. And being a city boy myself, I was not gonna mess around. I went up to the second floor of the MBT guest house, but I didn't think snakes can get up to the second floor very easily. Whereas Dina Bandhapu, who's dealt with snakes for so much, he had just a very, very long bamboo stick, and almost like a shuffleboard. He was pushing the snake around and pushing him out of the MBT. But I was, my heart was pounding, even though I was on the second floor, because snakes have that amazing energy. If anyone's come in touch with a snake, and what to speak of a cobra, what to speak of a huge one. That so when he stood up, gosh, I would say he was about 5 or 6 feet tall. I mean, it's huge. So when Prabhupada writes here, although the mind may be merged in spiritual consciousness, one should always be very careful in dealing with it, just as one is careful in dealing with a snake. So if we see ourselves getting into some material consciousness, maybe we should figuratively run to the second floor of the MVT and say, no, I don't want to be anywhere near that mindset. Prabhupada continues, one should never think that his mind is trained and that he can do whatever he likes. One interested in spiritual life should always engage his mind, and here's one of the secrets, in the service of the Lord, so that the enemies of the mind, who always accompany the mind, will be subdued. If the mind is not engaged in Krishna consciousness, and listen to this, at every moment, there is a chance that it will give way to its enemies. There is a chance. In this way, we become victims of the mind. Chanting the Hare Krishna mantra engages the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna constantly. Thus, the mind's enemies do not have a chance to strike. Following Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's example in these verses, this is from the 11th chapter of the Madhya Lila, verse 11. We should be very careful in dealing with the mind, which should not be indulged in any circumstance. Once we indulge the mind, it can create havoc in this life, even though we may be, listen to this, even though we may be spiritually advanced. The mind is specifically agitated through the association of materialistic men and women. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, through his personal behavior, warns everyone to avoid meeting a materialistic person or a woman. And of course, we understand what or a woman meaning in the context of seeking the enjoyment that one can derive from that association. So these are, Prabhupada's not mincing words here. And I have different thoughts on this, but one that came to my mind this morning, early morning here, we really want to avoid the modes of passion and ignorance like the plague, and really cultivate the mode of goodness. And that is not easy. That is not easy. It was a lot easier, I could say, in some ways, in pre-computer times, when I got interested in Krishna consciousness. There was no computers, no cell phones. No one was practically allowed to read or encouraged to read newspapers. So there was so much less coming in from external stimuli. And really living in the Brahmacharya ashram, there was really not much opportunity to really associate so much with the material world. Of course, if you want to be in Maya, you can get in Maya anywhere, right? Kal Krishna Das, I was just reading that pastime in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He was with Lord Chaitanya himself, and he got deviated and attracted to the opposite sex while traveling, while being the personal servant of Lord Chaitanya. But still, there's just so much stimuli in our lives, or potentially in our lives. This notification pops up on our phone, and we scroll through our social media, and then this email comes in and that disturbs us, and this happens and that, there's just so much bombardment. And it behooves us to, kind of go figuratively up in that helicopter and look down at our lives and decide, is that really how I want to live my life? This is fresh in my mind because me and a group of devotees, a small group of devotees, we gave each other a personal challenge that for this week coming up to Ram Navami yesterday, we would not use social media at all. We wouldn't check it. We wouldn't check the news. And we would only use YouTube for explicitly Krishna conscious, materials. So I've been doing that for, some days, and I can see already it has a positive effect on my consciousness. And I'm, really now Ram Navami's over last night, looking and trying to think, to what extent do I want do I want to expose myself to what do I want to expose myself to in these, remaining years of my life? And, because we use the word in Sanskrit of samskar, right? That samskar means mental impressions. And pretty much anything we listen, we hear, we see, especially those two senses, they make this mental impression. And so what mental impressions do we want? It's what is it? It's a kind of like algorithm in YouTube, right? If you start checking out cute kittens on YouTube, they're going to send you more and more cute kittens, when you type in youtube.com. And the mind is kind of like that. When whatever impressions we put in our mind, it becomes more and more attracted to those things. Even interestingly, and I think we probably have had this experience, that even seemingly negative things, often our minds have a perverted attraction to negativity. We kind of almost get some kind of perverted pleasure from being fearful, being angry, being upset, being anxious. It's a I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but it's an interesting phenomenon. So being careful about what samskar. Now, of course, the folks like you all at 7 a.m, getting on, and I know many of you, I see you're regularly on the Bhakti Center classes. You're probably already doing this here because you're filling your morning samskars with the Srimad Bhagavatam, and that's so maybe we're preaching to the choir here a bit, but just taking that step back, looking at how we spend our 24 hours and seeing to what extent are we filling our consciousness with things that are favorable and things that are unfavorable. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it has these 6 symptoms of surrender, and the first 2 are anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya varjanam, to accept things that are favorable to the cultivation of bhakti and to reject things that are unfavorable to the cultivation of bhakti. And that takes determination. And I would say, and where does that determination come from? It comes from what you're doing, it comes from sadhu sangha. The Chaitanya Charitamrita also says that the root of bhakti is sadhu sangha. That's a very, root. And I think we have that experience that just like I was just, reading the 11th chapter of Madhya Lila yesterday. So when I started, thinking about what I would talk about in this class, by having that association with Srila Prabhupada and his purports, and how it was the devotees were trying to convince Lord Chaitanya to give his association to Maharaj Patrapuruta. That's also mainly in chapter 12. And Lord Chaitanya was just saying, I'm a sannyasi. I can't do that. Just hearing about the strictness of your Lord Chaitanya, and then in the purports, Prabhupada is emphasizing that so that by hearing that yesterday, that made a samskar and something that I'm remembering today, and then passing it on to y'all. So we want to be very, if our actual goal, prema pumartha mohan, if our actual goal is to develop our love for Krishna, then we want to be serious about accepting that which is favorable, rejecting that which is unfavorable. And that sometimes takes a little, well, you know, I use the word determination, but almost, it reminds me of dealing with the dogs in Vrindavan. Henry knows about the dogs in Vrindavan because I had a dog named, my son named him Sleepy, that lived outside our house in Vrindavan. And one time Henry came to see us, and Henry's nice shoe got chewed up by Sleepy. Remember that, Henry? But the way to deal with the dogs in Vrindavan, because they'll come up to you and go, rah, rah, rah. And if you show some fear, some being timid, then they keep going. They keep going. But if you just go, put, then they just like whimper up, and they go away. Sometimes we have to be a little like that with our mind. Our mind, we see our mind drifting to something that isn't favorable. We just go, hut. Let's get back to Krishna consciousness. It sometimes takes that being aware, first of all, that our mind is drifting, and then having some chutzpah to nip it in the bud and bring it back to the lotus feet of Krishna. I'd like to hear what comments you have or questions this time. I covered a lot of, kind of a few things there.
Dr. Hugo, followed by Jamuna Jaya.
Hare Krishna. Oh.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. Yeah, I want to share and say thank you for the class. Yeah, it's very interesting to talk about the mind and also think about the stimulations. And it makes me think, and that is true. Our mind, if we want to find simile or something that can be similar to understand how it works. Something that helps me is to think that our minds is like a bottle of water, right? Anytime that we shake it and shake it and shake it, we cannot see anything through it, right? The water is like gray and you don't understand what's going on and you don't see through it, right? But once you leave the water and let time go and just leave the bottle stopped, right? And taking its time, everything became clear and you can see through the water, right? That is our mind, like the stimulations that we have outside, even like artificial stimulations, I guess, right? We do many things that are not supposed to do. Like in the night, we go outside and many lights all the time impact the phone notifications, right? But when we go to the forest, no light, no noises, no phone, right? Just nature, just maybe a river, maybe animals. So no artificial, right? No artificial impact. And I guess that can make us to think about it and to reflect and take care of it, right? Thank you.
Thank you. And there's different analogies. You use the one of water. The Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita uses the example of a flame in a windless place. And how it's just nice and straight. And but when a wind comes, it gets disturbed in different ways. So
right.
cultivating the mode of goodness, and it comes down to practical things, like simple practical things, like when you wake up in the morning, making your bed, keeping your car clean, keeping your house clean, putting things away in the proper place. All of these, even little things, wearing, nice, fresh, clean clothes, all of these, just cultivating sattva wherever we can in our life. It has an effect on our consciousness. Jamuna Jaya ji, you have your hand up?
Hare Krishna. Thank you for class. I love these reminders of the snake, the danger of the mind. And it just always makes me giggle because I think of two quotes that I always think in this regard. One is from our Shama that used to live at the Bhakti Center. She always said so beautifully, always remember, you can't believe everything you think. And so I always think of that. And then Jai Jagannath once said, and this is, I see his voice and his face in my mind when I think that he says, you got to treat your mind like a bad neighborhood in a movie. Don't go in alone. You know, those movies where everyone in the audience is screaming, don't go in, don't listen to them. And the person walks right in. And that's what we do. And a wise soul, there's so many quotes that say the wise don't play. They don't play with Maya, even a little tiny bit, like Lord Chaitanya meeting King Pachavaruja. He's like, I'm not gonna touch that. So just such good reminders of we really have to be careful of that snake because it wants to get us at every turn. So
I like that.
you.
I can remember those two. Those are really good ones.
Are they great? Yeah. Don't believe everything you think and treat your mind like a bad neighborhood in a movie. Don't go in. Don't go in.
Thank you, Jamuna. Hugo.
Hare Krishna. Vraj Vihari people. Thank you for offering your time and energy to the class. Something I think about is that Prabhupada writes and says in a few places here and there that some amount of sense gratification is necessary just to keep the body apart.
Sure.
And even I'm thinking of the Bhagavad Gita. Krishna says that proper regulation of eating, sleeping, work, and recreation should be done in order to maintain one's purity. So, and we see that sometimes, I mean, especially in our Krishna consciousness movement, like even religious scholars will say like Krishna consciousness is probably the highest standard of religious principles that you can have of any like religious tradition in the world. And we see that sometimes people come in and they have this high standard in mind, and sometimes there's an oppression or suppression of desires, and that works for a little bit, but then it just explodes and people do something really bad, really egregious, because it just kind of like bursts like a balloon. So I'm wondering what your insight is, what your guidance is on kind of how to find the line between, I guess, maintenance, like giving the mind something to do, but then not going into indulgence. Because to cut everything off, that seems counterproductive. We've seen that throughout our history, except for a few very special individuals. But at the same time, we're saying here, like, don't indulge in the mind at all. So how to understand those two polarities?
Thank you for bringing the conversation down to the ground, because I might have been sometimes on the 20,000-foot level. So many things were going through my mind as you were talking. It's very individual, and we have different adhikars. We have different. Well, put it this way: everyone on this call is somewhere different on the spectrum, from first no consciousness of Krishna to full consciousness of Krishna. And gosh, so many things to say. It's such a beautiful question. I can say for myself that although theoretically, when I was a young brahmachari, although theoretically I understood that the goal of life was to love Krishna, really I think in my mind and in my consciousness, I thought the goal of life was to remain a brahmachari. I missed the I missed the memo on developing pure love for Krishna, and that that wasn't the best consciousness to be in. And I probably gave some classes. If I would have given a class on this verse in the 1970s, you would have like, whoa, that was heavy. all the ladies on the call right now would have like, okay, I'm out of here. Probably. So it's tricky. The reason I bring up adhikar and our different eligibilities is that it's very and that it's individual, is that for someone who really has the adhikar to be a lifelong celibate and just, just vyavasaya mikab udhir ekeha, they're single-minded. We want to encourage that. We don't want to say, yeah, well, just don't be a madman, don't be too crazy. It's a gradual process. For those people who can really be, on the straight and narrow their whole life, we want to encourage that. And then for others who don't have that, they're not in that kind of mindset, we don't want to discourage them, or like you say, kind of encourage things that may even affect their mental health, right? And you were giving the example that Prabhupada said that, he said that sense gratification is like salt. And so anyone here who's a cook, like when I travel, usually I'm in a hotel room and I cook for myself, and I have to know how much salt to put in the preparation before right? So it shouldn't be not too much or not too little, like you were referring to that. So it's a tricky thing, and it takes appropriate guidance. Just like I was thinking of bringing up children, or even bringing up my son. So my son was born and raised in Vrindavan, so he had a kind of a kick start in that sense. But and when he was young, we just kind of fed him Krishna, like he was like a sponge. I think every child, I'm not talking about my son, but children when they're young and have devotee parents, they can just be like a sponge soaking up Krishna consciousness. And you can pretty much, pour it in, and they love to hear Krishna's pastimes. Sometime, when they reach their teenage years, it's trickier. And so we would do things like with my son, like we would, we bought him a computer, we bought him computer games, and it was kind of regulated. And we tried not to, and Prabhupada said about bringing up children that if you force them to do devotional practices, they'll be resentful of bhakti as they grow up. They won't want to do it. And at the same time, we wanted him to have so we tried to make, in his case, we tried to make Krishna consciousness fun, enjoyable. Like when he thought of Janmashtami, he didn't think, fasting. Ooh. No, he thought, wow, Janmashtami is coming, fantastic. We get to do this, we get to do that, we get to go here, we get to go there. So that's just an example that came to my mind. And it was kind of like most people in America don't drive a stick shift anymore, but it's kind of like driving a clutch. How much to put on the gas, how much to let up on the clutch. If you ever driven a manual car, it's a little like that. And so it does take appropriate guidance to, or as we might say, in managerial speak, they have the comfort, the comfort zone, the stretch zone, and the stress zone. So we want to put people in the stretch zone, where they're making endeavors to be Krishna conscious, but they're not doing it in such a way that, like they go from, we've seen this, right? 0 to 60, like that, and then they crash, right? So, and in the last 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, in his purports, Prabhupada uses the word gradual 11, I think it's 11 times. So he talks about the gradual process of Krishna consciousness. So we don't want, shooting stars, but we want to just be making gradual process. So the comfort zone, we don't want to be in that, just like whatever, I'll just, schnick, schnick, giddy, giddy, ray, ray, I'll chant my rounds while I'm watching, the news. And the stress zone, that I should be like so-and-so Swami, but the stretch zone. Anyway, that's thoughts that cross my mind. I hope that's a little helpful. And are you in the Navy now?
Thank you for an answer, Prabhu. I am in the Navy now.
Where are you stationed?
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina.
Okay, because I don't know if you know Dean. Dean is a devotee in the Navy. Really nice guy.
I'll need to keep an ear out for him. Haven't heard of him.
Connect the two of you. Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. We only have a couple of minutes, but Ananda Manjari, you have your hand up?
Hare Krishna. I wanted to add to what you just shared, an analogy I heard from Chaitanya Charan Prabhu, and he was speaking about disciplining our mind like we parent a child, which is that we protect the child from the danger as much as we can because we know where, what the dangers are. And so that in this way we are, giving it enough freedom to grow and do what it needs to do, but still really have the firm boundaries. And simultaneously, we also don't starve the child, like we really truly nourish it. And I feel like that really relates to that sentence of like, where is the nourishment and where is the boundary, which goes back to the balance. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you.
Thank you. And if our mind is just fixed on developing love for Krishna, then everything, we'll end with this. Rupa Goswami's, because we were kind of talking, and Hugo's question touches upon renunciation. So Rupa Goswami is such a genius because the question comes, how can you be renounced and not have your heart become hard? Because if we just focus on Gyan, it can be quite, and that was kind of where I was at as a young brahmachari. I'm not this body, the material world is a place of suffering, janma, mrityu, jara, vyadhi, dukkha, doshana, darshanam. And we can get into kind of I was a mean person when I was not a mean person, but I was a fanatic. I remember we used in Detroit, the men chanted in the temple room and the women chanted just outside. And I would be like, I had my head down and just like almost like a bulldozer, just running through the ladies to get to the temple room. I probably committed some Vaishnav aparads in those days. But the Rupa Goswami has this verse: Anashaktasya vishayan yartaham upayunjita nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yuktam vairagya uchate. That if you see everything in the Krishna sambandha, in relationship to Krishna, and that Krishna is the owner and the proprietor of everything, then you're not the proprietor, you're not the owner, you're seeing everything as Krishna's property and using everything in his service. So then by that remembrance of Krishna, that softens your heart, and you become automatically renounced because you're not in the enjoying spirit. So it's a brilliant way of being, of seeing, connecting everything with Krishna and using everything in Krishna's service. And that is true renunciation. And falgu vairagya, fake renunciation, is what we were talking about before. So so really developing our bhakti and really understand the goal of life is to love Krishna, and doing things that are favorable to developing that love will settle everything that Hugo was asking. It'll put everything in the right place. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Vraj Bihari Prabhu. It is so nice to have a devotee of your caliber on the call, former fanatic, presently mature Vaishnava, who can offer a lot of guidance and advice. Thank you. Thank you. Adipusha Prabhu, you wanted to say something?
Well, I didn't see his hand up. I'm sorry, Adipusha.
Unmute.
Hare Krishna. Wonderful class. Perfect. Wonderful controversy about the balance between indulgence, crossing the line, and going in the right direction. And there's a analogy I've heard in class. In the Wild West, they have these vast prairies, plains, and there's they let the beef cows out there for years until they grow up, and then they go out and herd them back. And some of these are called mavericks. They get so independent that you can't herd them with the herd. Okay. So when they get a maverick and they can't herd it, they have these little burrow, and they tie a rope around the burrow, and they tie a rope around the maverick. And the burrow knows where the ranch is, where the goal is. You have to remember where the goal is. And whenever there's a little, even though the burrow is outweighed by this huge steer by 1,500 pounds, every time there's a little slack in the rope, the burrow goes a little closer in the right direction, because the steer is just wandering around. So it just keeps taking in a little slack. And then 2 weeks later, the burrow shows up at the ranch with the maverick steer. So we have to remember, like you said perfectly, we want to remember what the goal is. We have to desire properly. And Krishna is so wonderful that Krishna will help us step by step, gradually, like you said, go in the right direction. We have to know where we're going. We have to look where that slack is to drag our mind and senses in the proper direction and keep, like you said, the focus on love of Krishna. And it's not just a matter of like harsh discipline, but it's a matter of replacing our focus on selfishness to the focus on pleasing the Lord and pure love. Krishna will help us. Krishna is so wonderful. We're not just in this alone. It's not a self-help program. Sometimes they say, pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Try it. It doesn't work. It's not a self-help program, but the Lord will help us. We desire properly, know where we're going, and wherever there's a little capacity to move in the right direction, keep going that way. Krishna will get us home. Full glory to God. Hare Krishna. Wonderful class. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Adipusha Prabhu, for the analogy. Is Darshan coming?
Yeah, right now.
Bhima Prabhu, Afterglow. You can stay for Afterglow. We'll take your comment. Thank you, Vraj Vihari Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
So it's Darshan time. Cameras.
That's what I know. Yeah. Ferocious. I was shaking.
What is the volume?
Govinda, Hare Krishna, Govinda, Hare Krishna, Govinda, Hare
That sounds like a wake-up call. Okay. It's Afterglow. Welcome to the Afterglow. Bhima Prabhu, what was your comment?
Haribol, is Maharaj still is Maharaj still there?
No, he left.
He's gone. Well, it's kind of off-timed. I wanted to just say, as a humorous aside, for my dog, dogs, of course, they have to follow their instinct, and their instinct is, of course, especially if they're not fixed, is sex life, and they will do whatever it takes. My boy here, Ram, we live in the country. He will run 5 miles through the woods if he detects that there's some instinct to indulge himself, so to speak, by nature. But I have bought, if you can see, this is a $900 radar collar, complete with a screen that tells me exactly to the square foot where he is, so that when he takes off, when I don't pay attention and it's springtime and the girl dogs are in heat, he waits until I don't pay attention, and then he takes off. And so I have to get in the van and track him down, which is always fun, but it's also dangerous because he has to cross many roads to get to his girls. But what the purport here is that if you have a true friendship with another devotee or a group of devotees, but most often a true friendship, Matajis with other Mataji, women with other women, men with other men, a true relationship where you can reveal your mind in confidence, then like a radar caller, that devotee will always, if you're true, if you're sincere and open to that devotee and say, Prabhu, I'm having trouble, or this is on my mind, that person will, like with this thing, they will see how far you are away from Krishna consciousness. Because when we get swept up by Maya, the one trick of Maya is that you don't know that you're being swept up by Maya. You do not know. Your mind will make 1,000 rationale, which will convince you that what you're doing is the correct thing to do. It is a very rare soul that knows when he's going into Maya that he's going into Maya, and he usually corrects himself. But anyways, we should always make sure that we develop close relationships where we can reveal our minds in confidence to another and not isolate ourselves. Prabhupada always said, Radhanath Maharaj always said, you can't do it alone. We can't go it alone. We always at least have to have one devotee who we know is fixed up, who we can reveal our mind in confidence without fear of being judged. So everyone, go out and get yourself this $900 relationship with another devotee, and he'll keep track of you. He'll keep track. And actually, there's a button on here that gives him a little shock. If I catch him as he's leaving the yard, I can give him a little shock. It's just a little jolt. And that reminds him that he shouldn't be going. Yeah. So maybe you get a little shock. But anyways, Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Bhima Prabhu. Yeah, like Vraj Vihari Prabhu said, Bhakti, devotees association is the root of Bhakti. And it's a very nice service when a devotee is available to offer guidance and correction. Sometimes devotees are reluctant to do it, but some devotees aren't. So we appreciate that. Adi, Purusha Prabhu?
Just so everybody knows, when Bhima says my boy, he's talking about his dog. When he says the girls, he's talking about the female dog, just so you don't think his son is running over the woods after the girls.
I understand that, actually. I understand to call to the dogs like a boy and girl, because actually I love dogs. And if I'm able to have one with me,
actually will be a daughter or a son. So 100% agree with Bima.
Nice, nice. Thank you very much, everybody, dear devotees, for participating actively and wholeheartedly in this class every day. Thank you very much. We love you all. Hari Hari Bol. Get yourself the device. Pray to Krishna that he sends a person in your life who can do that service. And yeah, we will make it. We will all make it to the barn where the food is, where Krishna is, right? We're mavericks. We will make it.
No.
Woof.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah, clear. Nobody coming. You can go. Go, 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 go. Go.
Okay.
Go, go, go,
Bye,
go,
Krishna.
go.
Go, go.
Yeah.
Adi.
Woof.
Drive safely. Drive safely. Don't run
Woof.
too far into the woods.